Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Regime Season 1, Episode 4. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, very much keeping in line with the past two episodes, we do get another time skip like I wondered if we would, but it wasn't to the large degree I thought. I thought maybe we'd get well, you went from 2 weeks to 2 months. I was like, are we going to make it years now? It's like, no, we're doubling up by making it 4 months now. So I'm wondering, is it going to be like this whole thing? By the time we get to episode 5 or 6, we got to start getting into years most likely. It has to be, just for the sake. But I do once again, I brought this up last episode. I think it's so interesting, the choice to also make it so that so much happens and then they've had to live with whatever new developments happened to previous episodes. Like, for example, everything that went down to episode 3. Herbert or Zubak. I keep flipping back and forth. Herbert was arrested. He's been in prison for 4 months. So you kind of have to live with that and just how stir crazy he's going because he's hearing Elena's announcement over the radio because it has to be played even in the prison. Which, when we actually look at that prison, well, we know some of Elena's people got arrested in the first episode, but maybe they got sent to a different prison because he's in a very specific prison. Because we only see 2 prison guards and we see one other prisoner other than Zubak. So you're like, is it a very specific prison he's in, or does he only stay in one section? Later on, Zubak knocks out, was it Tom and Vin? The only 2 guards we see in the entire episode. So I'm like, is there no other guards in this prison, or maybe it's maybe it's a larger prison, but they're only because there is one person Zubak sees smoking, so they might be in a very specific section of the prison. Maybe the other ground. I mean, it looked like it was just outside, around the outside on the other side of the fence. So not unless it's a larger prison and they're in the VIP wing or something like that. But yeah, he's going stir crazy. It's unclear if he just has not been able to sleep the past 4 months or not, or is it a recent development, but he's going stir crazy, can't sleep. Hearing Elena's voice is just clawing at him, which I think is such an interesting thread, that because the whole commentary later on is about how Elena gets inside of your head. There's a whole element of basically people are born with pain. Elena takes advantage of that pain and turns it into anger, and she uses that anger to feed her position and stuff like that. But the whole point was later on being now that's kind of what she kind of fed on is now being kind of taken away from her in substance wise. It's kind of it's what sustained her, what kept her going, and now it's being taken from her. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially when we tie it into every episode. Elena has a new thing, whether it's the mold or the potatoes or God, what was the thing last episode? I just watched the episode and I'm already blanking on it. But this episode, it's her burning up. And the rest of the palace is freezing because she's got these massive AC units blasting all the time. So everywhere in the palace is freezing, but she is burning up. And people are so cold that they're wearing fur coats. But it's take that off and burn it before she sees it, because once again the whole point is to play into our delusions or whatever, because you don't want to break the illusion. It almost seems like they're it's an urban legend, because I think it ended up being BS, but there's a whole talk of, you don't want to wake someone up if they're sleepwalking, that could be dangerous. I don't think there's truth to that, but that's always one of those wives' tale that you've heard that you've always just kind of, you always took as fact, but it's BS. At least I believe it's BS. I don't think there's any scientific facts to go. So it's kind of that of let's not break up her delusion. I mean, for one, it's going to cause us problems because she's going to it ends up actually playing. It's this. There's actually an interesting point about. I'm not trying to say I'm making an interesting point, but something I thought about this episode, especially when it comes to Elena's situation, kind of heavily reminds me of, if you've seen The Bear, Donna. The whole conversation around that in Fishes is, when you keep asking someone if they're okay, and then they start feeling why am I not okay? And then they start acting not okay. That's what people are afraid of, so that's why they placate Elena so much. So Now, obviously, she's complaining about Oscar's bad breath. The fact of the matter is he sleeps in the same bed as her, but I think it's interesting. After she made that complaint, she brings it up later on in the episode too, but after that, Oscar no longer is able to sleep in the same bed as her. Also, I think it's interesting too, he's her new moisture person. I don't think it's a, was it moisture he was still detecting? I can't remember, but like it's kind of interesting see, because we haven't done that since episode 1, because we moved on from that at the end. So it's interesting to see that kind of came back to some degree, and it almost feels poetic that it's like, oh, like she kind of fell back into, it's not mold anymore, but it's still kind of like, I mean, I guess like that's also supposed to be like I've never used the actual word, but it's like, I guess there's a little bit of hypochondriac to Elena's circumstances. I mean, which I think that's also supposed to be the irony behind it too, because she's the doctor, but once again, doctors make the worst patients, because I'm sure there are therapists that do go to therapy, but can you like put the doctor that you are aside, and even a medical professional, it's like, well, this medical professional gave me this opinion, but I'm not going to trust their opinion, I'm going to trust mine. Lena's kind of in that same boat. I don't know if that's the parallel they're going for with making the point over and over again, reminding you she is a doctor. So it feels like that point is meant to be there. That irony of she's his doctor, but she's acting irrationally. Like none of this, like her medical brain should be telling her, no, this isn't the case. She would know better than anyone else. Because isn't Nicholas also a doctor too? I think it's interesting too that, really quickly, Elena does seem to still care about Zubai, because she asked Agnes, it's like, oh, how about it? Is it getting any sleep? And Agnes is like, a little bit, here and there. So it's like, okay. So it's still fighting, it's still surviving. Because she did have this like mixed emotion on her face at the end when she saw Herbert being taken away, because despite everything, she does like him because he compliments her in a way that no one else did. But the story and just her getting inside her own head with her dad, which that's another interesting thing about this episode too, if you notice, because I mean, maybe I'm misremembering, but I think every episode she's visited and talked to her dad. This is the one episode she never did. When she was like walking in a hallway at one point, I'm like, well, this doesn't, it looks like this could be on the way to your dad, but it wasn't. It was her on her way to the prison to visit Zubag and Edward, but we'll get to that soon enough. Well, never mind. I'll go ahead and finish up my thought process for later, because it's been 4 months they've been living in the constant protest and the sanctions that have been placed on them by other countries and NATO and stuff. The deals they made with China, especially when it came to the cobalt, and their because they're supposed to be trying to like build up factories to kind of, they're supposed to build them up so that the cobalt could be like, utilized in that capacity, but it hasn't come through. In fact, China's kind of screwed them over when it comes to the sugar beets, because now there is a cheaper Chinese sugar on the market cutting into them, so like less is being exported from their sugar beet fields. Obviously absolutely nothing from the cobalt mines, because America is completely cut off from them and has nothing to do with them, especially even more so since they doubled down and are in bed with China. But then also like the Fabian corridor situation, that's still, once again, the sanctions and issues, they're suffering from that, but Elena's making it seem like everything's okay, everything's fine. I love when she had her meeting with like her cabinet. She was in the bathtub, and it was kind of like that moment I was bringing up before. She was like, basically act normal, but like the more you're not acting normal, the more of a fucking issue you're going to have with it, so just act as normal as possible. So once again, trying to placate her in every way possible. And I love that, I think it's Schiff who brings up the horse thing. I'm like, what the hell is the horse thing gonna be? It's like, I think it was during a protest, I think is what they said it happened. Basically, there was a Mountie of sorts on a horse. The horse got spooked and kicked a pregnant lady, and Schiff put it in the most crude way possible, saying like, oh, kind of like a abrupt abortion. And then I think it was maybe Laskin, maybe the other one saying like, oh, and in fact it was actually kind of a late term abortion, and it's like, oh, the mom is dead, and so she doesn't think it's that big of a deal to bring up the horse and stuff like that. So to the point, she's meeting with children from Westgate because they've got to put up a certain front because news is running wild with, even though she's putting out her own, they're putting out their own propaganda to kind of rebuttal all the justified criticisms that Elena's getting. And I mean, I think there's also a deeper commentary that you could read there of like, that's also the news cycle. You never know what to believe because there are half-truths and there are truths and there's biases and there's perspectives, you know, but it's not a balanced perspective because it's like, right, you have everyone's, I mean, you know, I mean, our day and age, you can't deny that everyone's dug in on their side. And, you know, so it's interesting. Like it feels like there's that deeper layer of just like, also just a commentary of also like, right, you never know what's the truth because it's like, right, the people are being fed this lie of like, oh, everything's fine, don't believe the BS that people are telling you. Obviously Zubak himself is hearing that, so it's almost like the brainwashing effect that Elena has, especially when she's putting out a message literally every day, which I'm like, I don't even know if like, I don't follow, you know, the royal family enough. I don't know if like the queen ever made announcements like every day, or like wouldn't it be like every once in a while? I don't know. I've never been in like Europe or the UK, so I've never known like how that works on a daily basis, whether you like hear from the queen all the time. I thought it was only like in very special occasions you would hear from the queen. So I don't know. So that's why I'm like, yeah, hearing her on a daily basis once again is meant to be the propaganda to brainwash you, which I think that's so fascinating. And her meeting with the children who are asking questions, but all the questions I think were set up by their parents because it's like, well, she wanted to meet the kids because it was meant to be like a softball type of situation, a very like easy alley-oop. It's supposed to be a win. It's like, oh, let's start off with a moment of silence, and she couldn't even do that. She's like, it's a stupid horse, who cares? Let's go into these questions. And it's like, oh, the parents are voicing, well, their parents, through their children, are voicing their concerns about, you know, the economy, as well as what it means for those who work in the sugar beet fields, like what their future holds with everything going on. And one kid was like, oh, I want to be a doctor. And she's like, you know what? And then she went on a whole tirade about the horse, and it's like, oh boy, we passed that already. You had an opportunity to kind of lean into that, which I love. She does lean into it later, but she went into this whole tirade about like, right, like the horse and yada, 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 so on and so forth, to the point her nose starts bleeding. So it's like, is that from the cold air? She's like, cold air? He's like, I'm sorry, hot, dry air. So interesting. Once again, doctors make the worst patients, especially one that's a hypochondriac who's kind of losing her grip on reality to some extent. So there's that angle to it. Circling back really quickly to Zubak, we see that he finally meets the man we've heard so much about but never seen, Edward Kipling. Was it Kiplinger? Played by Hugh Grant. I think I saw that I was looking through IMDb and stuff. I saw he was in the cast. I don't think I paid attention to who he was playing. Maybe it wasn't even known, but I saw that he was in the cast. I was like, oh, interesting. I love the reveal of like, oh, he's not in his, like, oh, they're saying he's up in his mansion living off the riches that he's stolen from this country. It's like, nah, he's in prison. They put on a show, take him out of prison every once in a while, you know, film a couple appearances just to make it, to sell the narrative that they've created. So it's like interesting. And obviously Zubak is, you know, brainwashed and believes in Elena, so he's not believing a word out of it. And that's the back and forth, because there's an element of the way he treats Herbert. Like I said, I keep going back and forth of how they go about treating him. It's very similar to how, like, if you compare Edward to Elena in the first episode, there are direct parallels, because he chews out one of his people, one of the two guards, Vid, for referring to Zubak as the Butcher, which Elena did the same thing. She placated, but like, no. They'll call you the Butcher, but she never really felt that way about it. But she did later on when he didn't no longer side it with her, or she had issues with him. She threw that in his face then and there. It's like, oh, I'm not going to treat you the same way other people do until I get agitated. And I mean, to be fair, that's when you're angry, you want to hurt the person as much as possible. So stuff you've kind of kept in your back pocket, it's time to pull out that Uno card of attacking them, you know? So I'm sure I smashed a lot of stuff together in that poorly constructed metaphor I was trying to go for there, but hopefully that made sense. So, but it's interesting, like, because at first I was like, oh, it seems like there's some truth to that. I was like, are we going to really pay Elena? I mean, Elena's off her rocker. Edward seems like he's okay, so it kind of sells a certain narrative of, oh, maybe he is a good guy. But this whole episode's about narrative, so it makes sense. It turns out he's just like Elena. He tried to placate Zubak, but be like, no, I'm just like you. Hell, he's like, I might be even worse. So it seems like he might be a genuinely good guy, for the most part. He wants what's best for the country and stuff like that. Him and Elena had their back and forth. He kind of showed a very not so nice side of himself the way he talked about Elena, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, like I thought it was interesting too, because the real crack in the armor was like seeing that nasty side of himself, like, oh, like there's a lot more in common with Elena. It's hard to say who's worse, and it's like the devil you know versus the devil we don't know. Like this country knows the devil, Edward as the devil, but it's like, well, how much of that is true? How much of that was propaganda created by Elena and her people, stuff like that. But when he referred to Zubak as the butcher, and then later on he was like, yeah, she did talk about you and referred to you as a butcher. It's like, Elena, those words never left Elena's mouth. That's what he called him. It's like, oh, that's why I was like, okay, you're on some bullshit. I know it. Like the moment he referred to him as the butcher and then did that, I was like, oh, so you on some bullshit. So you're trying to sway Zubak to your side because you need allies. I don't know what he wanted. Well, it seems like he wanted Zubak specifically because it's like, oh, you're a West Gator as well. So it's like, once again, kind of getting the common folk more on your side. It's like, if you could get through Zubak, you could get to anybody, and having him by your side kind of adds validity and merit to you kind of usurping things from Elena when this all inevitably blows up in her face. Seems to be the path he was trying to go down. But he, didn't do any favors with Elena, like having Vin and Tom beat the ever-living shit out of him, his face and his body. But then later on we saw he got beat up again, but I'm like, well, she never came to visit the prison, so not unless that was supposed to be like in between, but I was like, no, I think it's meant to be him wounding himself even more. He probably really pushed her buttons a lot during their first back and forth for the sole purposes of he wants her to beat the crap out of him so that he could sell this even more to Zubak of like, oh, look at this woman, but look at me, I'm seeing this. Oh, you haven't read my book, have you? Okay, good man, you're strong and you're not going to believe that BS. He's just, once again, trying to sell this whole narrative just like Elena's selling her own narrative. But also, you smell the bullshit even more when he tried to tell, like, Zubak, like, oh, everything you want to do, we'll do. Like, the land reform. Well, we have to fix some of this stuff, first and foremost, and kind of fix things up. But then, yeah, we'll cut the Americans out for sure. It's like, Zubak could smell the bullshit now. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot one of my favorite lines in the episode, once again, about creating narratives and stuff like that. They were saying that the nosebleed that Elena had during the meeting with the children, like they sculpted that to be like, oh yeah, it was kind of a great conversation, yada yada yada. But they tried to they made the nosebleed situation that saying like basically the CIA was attacking her through frequencies and that's what caused her nosebleed. It's like, Jesus, the propaganda machine is running wild and rampant. Staying on Elena, it was actually Nicholas who suggested they meet with the West Gators because it's like, right, the children thing didn't fully work out. It was also live and everything, so that didn't help. Who knows if it was live? It seemed like it was supposed to be live. That was kind of the whole reservation they had. So I guess like maybe before they kind of fully, maybe it was live to the country, but then like to the international scale, they probably edited it. Maybe not. But either way, she has to leave the palace and go be around her people. As Nicholas says, that's her biggest issue. She's so disconnected with the people, and they won't love you if they feel like they can't get next to you or be with you. You haven't been amongst the people, so you have to change. Like, I know it's uncomfortable not being outside the palace, but she has to. She does kind of recognize it. Once again, she has moments of lucidity where she's like, oh, I know I'm going through basically menopause. I think that's what she was kind of implying that she was kind of going through, the vapors, the heat, not heat stroke, but the heat, the hotness and stuff. So she has her medications, like you got your air mask, like, you're good. So they go to Westgate. The place smells like crap. They're spraying stuff so they can, like, because it turns out it's a byproduct of the water that's removed from the sweet beets. That creates that god awful smell. That's the smell of shit. So, like, Westgaters don't even smell it anymore because they've, like, inundated with it because they're used to it all the time. I love that while she was talking to them and trying to reassure all the Sweet Beet Union people that everything was going to be fine, it's like, right, let's have a moment of silence for the woman that was kicked by the horse, and she was literally silent for, like, not even a minute, like a couple seconds, and let's kind of roll through this. Let's kind of, like, she was just once again trying to placate them, but also ease their minds about everything. They gave her a sweet beet plant, but she immediately told Nicholas to throw it out the moment they drove away. I'm surprised that situation. I was halfway expecting that situation to blow up in her face, but she handled it well and it all worked out. But the moment she got back to the palace, she had talked to, I believe it was Laskins, about everything, and basically to deal with the Sweet Beet Union. She basically wanted to plant evidence on them of saying, like, oh, they were colluding with America and they were dissenters and yada yada yada. And it's like, yeah, but that's going to cause more issues. Like, the protesting is already bad enough. It's going to get 10 times worse if we do this. Elena still went through with it, planted guns on them, planted American money on them. It's like, yo, the fix is in. I mean, it's just like, Elena's done some wild shit. This is probably, like, the most... I mean, to be fair, we already knew they were kind of, like, holding on to land and, you know, a shit ton of stuff that was kind of, like, hidden away. So we already knew they were on some criminal stuff. So it's like, it shouldn't be too surprising. But, man, that's fucking wild, that whole circumstance. So... And even Elena admits, like, oh, it works out in the end because now it makes it so that, right, if I shut down protests, I look like a monster. But here I am. If I'm fighting against terrorists and insurgents, it makes me look like the protector. It makes me look like the good guy. So it's like, right, you create your own villains to make yourself look like the hero. You know? So there's that. I didn't touch on it at all this episode, but there's the Agnes of it all. Still trying to be there for Oscar. We don't know how much of that's been rectified. It still doesn't seem like she's able to be around Oscar as much and as on top of things as she wants to be, because mainly he's around Elena until she got mad about his breath and stuff. So, but Agnes is getting these text messages saying, like, oh, I'll help you out. All things are kind of falling apart here, aren't they? I thought that had something to do with Edward, but it's like, no, it seems like it's America trying to, like, find any cracks in the armor to take advantage of, and so they're trying to reach out to her. Even later on, this guy's, hey, he's like, hey, I'm an American, Elena, Agnes, I could get you an Oscar here and taken care of. So, but Agnes was kind of getting swept up into it eventually because things were spiraling out more. She needed a place to take care of Oscar because the medication and obviously the environment he's being in right now is not good. So it's kind of going to mess him up. So, you know, Agnes is doing all that she can. So she was trying to try and reach out. But then, you know, she was like, right, I love my country. I don't know. I guess she was so nervous. Maybe she thought this was a test. Maybe something that guy said made her realize it was a test. So that's why she backed out. Or it's just, I can't take any chances. Especially like Oscar would be taken away from me forever. I might be thrown in a deep dark hole, so I'm not going to take any chances. And so she bails on that whole notion. But because of the situation, Elena is doubling down and is like, right, we got to be protected. So Agnes and Oscar, no one leaves the palace, which is ironic considering like everyone was allocated to the palace anyway, because once again, we've only seen everyone in the context of the palace. Once again, it's kind of interesting to see this the first time we've really seen Elena outside of the palace to that full extent, to the point that she was visiting the Sweet Beet Union. But I think it's also like any outside appearances she's had with the when it came to the palace, I think we're usually on palace grounds. Even if she wasn't in the palace proper, she's still in the grounds, just like she goes to, like, the greenhouse and stuff like that. So even when she's outside, she's just on the palace grounds, so it's not like she's ever strayed too far away until this meeting with the West Gators, the Sweet Beet Union and stuff. So, But now she's closing rank even more because she doesn't know who to trust, and so many conspirators around, and people are going to rise up, and especially with her move of turning them into the bad guys, the Sweet Beat Union, now it's going to cause more riots and more problems, especially because there are a lot of people that realize, like, yo, that's some bullshit she's doing and she's concocting, so it's riling people up even more. So you got to close rank. No one leaves the palace for their own protection. At the same time this was all going down, you had Zubak, like, he's getting swayed more and more by Elena's words. That's all he's hearing. I didn't talk about it, but that scene when she came to see Edward, they looked at each other through the window, and you see this, like, the screen, like, the colorization changes. It's almost like he's being visited upon by an angel, and there's, like, this bright kind of yellowish orange glow, like he's, like, almost basking in the light, and it dims and goes away the moment Elena walks away, when they stop locking eyes. But yeah, Zubak, I don't know if he killed Tom and then he definitely knocked him out, and he went and ended up killing Edward because he's like, yo, I see you for who you really are. He's like, you want me to love you, but I can't. I don't. And, that's when Edward showed his true colors, been like, oh, you people don't know what's good for you. You never have. You never did. Once again, showing his ugliness. And then Zubak ended up killing him because he pushed Zubak's buttons, because Zubak's like, oh, I want to be with her. Like, that's the only thing I care about. That is my dream, to be with her. And he strangled the dude and killed him. I was like, wow, I thought he'd be in more episodes. Nope. Not unless we see his ghost in the next episodes and he kind of starts haunting Zubak or something. Not unless that ends up being the case. But yeah, that was interesting development. But because of all of that, Elena, I thought was interesting, like, after he killed Edward, we see Elena laying in her bed and a smile creeps across her face, because I don't know if that's supposed to almost be this thing of they're in sync again, they're dreaming the same dreams, maybe. Maybe it's like everything, she feels like it's going her way, so Zubak for the first time is able to sleep, because he said he didn't want to sleep because he didn't want to, like, dream, and there was a whole conversation of, you're kind of a void, and that's what Elena does. She's taking advantage of you to sink her teeth in and fill you up with what she wants to. But yeah, Zubak gets taken out by Laskins and brought before her. And at first I was like, is this a dream sequence or something? Because they start making out, and he said, like, oh, I do want to fuck you right now. I'm like, wait, what? And they start hardcore making out and taking off their clothes. And Nicholas, as well as Agnes and Laskin there, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? And they pull Nicholas away. He's like, Elena. And yeah, they're practically doing it. So I'm like, that wasn't a dream sequence. That just happened right there in front of him. I was like, this show is so fucking weird. So yeah, some very, very interesting developments all around. Elena and Zubak are reunited, and I think stronger than ever. What this means in the aftermath, who knows? We still have 2 more episodes of craziness. Once again, I'm so curious to see what the new deal is beyond the air conditioner is going to be. What's the next shtick going to be next episode? But also, what happens with Elena and Zubak? What is Elena going to do? What's going to happen with Nicholas? How much of a time skip are we going to get this time? Is it going to be like, 8 months this time, or will we finally enter years, or will that be saved for between 5 and 6? It's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.